Hi, welcome to our 5th chapter of Architectural Visualization course. I am Oğuz. In today's lesson, we will start designing our environment. Doing so, we will be learning landscape and foliage modes. After learning the basics about these modes, I will be mentioning the highlights of my working process like we did in the last chapter. This is going to be a long chapter. Let's not waste any more time. Firstly, I would like to say that you don't need to apply this part. We will apply all of these again on our project level. I will briefly go over the landscape mode on an empty level. You can access the landscape mode from the top left corner of the screen or simply press Shift plus F2. The first screen that appears contains the basic data of the landscape, including data such as location, rotation, and scale. There are also section settings that we can adjust the size of the landscape. If you have a height map to create the landscape, you can switch to the Import from File option. By uploading your height map here, you can let Unreal create the landscape based on the data you uploaded. Let's set the landscape size and click Create. Now, we can move on to the Sculpt options. The landscape has two essential parts: the landscape material and the sculpt mode. Let's quickly go through the sculpt mode. In this mode, using a brush, we will essentially perform excavation work on the landscape. The sculpt option is used to raise and lower the terrain. If you hold down the left shift key, you can perform the lowering operation. Tool strength determines how quickly your brush will have an effect. Brush size defines the size of the brush, and brush fall-off sets the softness value of the brush edges. The erase option resets the effect you applied in the painted area. The smooth option smooths the terrain between elevations. Flatten option makes the surface flat. The ramp option adds a linear ramp between elevations. The erosion option simulates the erosion effect created over time by the movement of the terrain. The hydro option simulates the effect of water on the ground. The noise option gives the ground sharp transitions, opposite of smooth option. I don't exactly know about the retop option as I have never used it. The visibility option allows us to raise certain areas of the landscape, but there are settings we need to handle it in the material system. The blueprint option, if you have landscape blueprints, allows us to quickly create specific shapes. The mirror option serves as a mirror, taking the symmetry of regions from specified plane. The select option masks a specific area, allowing us to exclude that area from our working area. The copy option allows us to take a copy of an area and use the brush to create a copy in another area. Our summary is complete. Let's return to our normal level and get to work. We will start by creating a landscape. Let's create the material for our landscape first. We need to collect the materials we want for our landscape from Quixel Bridge. I collected 3 materials for this: sand, gravelly soil, and forest soil. You can see that I colored these collected materials green under the surface folder. Instead of using the automatically generated material instances by Quixel, we will create a new material that includes all 3. Let's create our material under the Smart Materials folder and name it Landscape. First, with Material Attributes node selected, change the blend mode of the material to masked. Then, transfer the textures of the downloaded materials into our material blueprint, grouping them into base color, normal, and ARD. The ARD textures at the bottom, as mentioned in earlier chapters, are textures created with the method of saving space from the ramp. The channels include ambient occlusion, roughness, and displacement inputs in order. Now we need a new node. Right-click and add Landscape Layer Blend. With this node selected, create 3 layers with the plus icon on the left. Name these layers sand, dirt, and gravel according to your selected materials, of course. Connect the base color textures to the layers we created. Then Create copies of this landscape layer blend node for normal maps and ARD textures as well. The reason we created 2 copies for ARD textures is that we will not be using the displacement feature. As mentioned before, problems can occur in the shadows created by Nanite with ray tracing. Let's bypass it for now. Connect the textures to the copies we created and connect the blend nodes to the correct places. I'm sure you can find the right places, but I will not be hiding my screen just in case. Finally, add the landscape visibility mask node. This node will contain layer infos for areas we will mask on the landscape. Our material is complete. We can create the landscape now. Let's switch to the landscape mode. Assign the prepared material, set our landscape size to 63x63, and press the create button. As you can see, the landscape has a strange material. This is because the layer infos have not been determined yet. For this setting, go to Paint tab and click on the small plus sign next to the material layers. Choose Weight Blended Layer and save it in the Materials folder. After doing this for all layers, select these layers and with your brush, you can make material changes on the landscape. If you can't see your brush, you can try changing the translucency option from ray tracing to raster on post-process volume. Now it is time to use the sculpt feature. Let's adjust our terrain to overlap with the surroundings of our building. When our adjustment is done, select the visibility feature. As mentioned, this feature will allow us to create holes on the landscape. We use this because we want to make the landscape invisible in the areas where our building is, so we don't see the soil indoors. Once we have completed this, we will need a sea. For the sea, we need a high-quality water material. We will obtain this water material from an asset available for free in Unreal Engine Store. After entering the store, search for Rural Australia and add the asset to our project. Click on Water in the Rural Australia folder in the content browser. Now we will create a new plane to generate the material on. Add a plane to our scene and scale it by multiplying the values by 1000. Place it at the height where you want your sea to be, then drag and drop our material onto it. This water material is really high quality and being free makes me very happy. I use it frequently in my projects. You can adjust the parameters in the material instance. My settings are currently as you can see on the screen. Now, we will create a road extending into our terrain. I have prepared a 3D object for our road. You can obtain this object from the folder I will be sharing with the course. Create a road folder inside Imported folder and transfer the 3D objects and textures inside. Right-click on Base Color and select Create Material. Then connect the normal occlusion and roughness values to material attributes and save. Now open the 3D mesh and drag our material as default material. Our 3D object we need for the road is ready. Now let's shape the road. For this, we will need a BP spline mesh blueprint mentioned in Chapter 1. Of course, before that, make sure the area where we will create our road is flat. You can use the flatten option from Landscape Sculpt features. The path doesn't have to be flat, but if it is not, you may have difficulty attaching the spline mesh seamlessly. In that case, you can make changes to the landscape. Now, select the BP spline mesh in our scene, and in the Details panel on the right, add our road object to the static mesh blank. After setting the section length to 500, you can freely create our road. You can extend this spline by dragging it while holding down the Alt key. Using the same technique, you can add the metal guardrail we obtained from Quixel Bridge next to our road. These are entirely up to what you want to add. After all, design will vary from person to person. Maybe you will do better than me. This depends entirely on the time and effort you put on the project. Now, Let's add an asphalt material from Megascans to our road clean object. As I said, you can try different materials, this is up to you. This asphalt pad will connect our road to the house. If you have difficulty attaching this spline mesh while creating the pad, you can make changes to the landscape. Now, let's use our static mesh to close the gap between our road and the entrance. It is time for the foliage mode. Foliage mode is essentially the quick painting and placement of static objects and actors onto the level using a brush. We can access this mode from where we reach the landscape or simply by pressing Shift+3. We need static meshes as the basic components. You can obtain these objects from the plants section on Quixel Bridge. After having the objects, find and drag the objects you want to use onto foliage section. You can place the objects on the scene by painting with the brush or by holding the Shift key to paint and clear selected areas from painted objects. You can change the density of each object by clicking on them and adjusting the parameters like brush size and paint density to achieve the desired scale. You can control the slope range where our objects will spawn using the ground slope settings. Also, on slope terrains, you will notice that our objects are placed perpendicular to the surface. You can cancel this feature by removing the Align to Normal option, allowing the plants to grow opposite to gravity. In summary, the foliage mode works like this. I'm aware that I went through it quickly, but you can experience these modes best by using them. Since their usage is simple, I am sure you will grasp them quickly. Now, let's go back to our original scene. As mentioned, we need plants objects for the foliage mode. Let's enter Quixel Bridge. You can choose any objects you want from the 3D plants section or even 3D objects. I need a grass object that I will use intensively in our terrain. I believe the grass clumps object under the grass lawn category is suitable for this purpose. Download the objects and drag them onto the foliage tool. Increase the density setting and start painting. As you can see, it is a quite simple logic. With this method, we can quickly transfer thousands of objects to our scene, and honestly, this is one of the most enjoyable parts of the process for me. While greening your area, make sure that the grass doesn't invade the inside of the building. An unrealistic image may occur. Now, let's create a small flower garden at the back of our building. I obtained the required object again from Quixel Bridge. The boxwood in the garden plants category will serve my purpose. Double-click on the object we will use and turn off ray tracing support from the details panel. Now we are ready to use our object. We will be using one of the blueprints of ArcViz template here again. Drag BP spawn mesh along spline blueprint to the level and our box object onto the static mesh section for our blueprint. Increase the distance between instances option to 50 and adjust the length of our blueprint. Can you see the key point in placing objects? If this blueprint didn't exist, we would have to manually place them one by one. After completing the placement, we can place the desired flowers in the inner part as we wish. After applying this in different ways in a few places, I found it sufficient. As you can see, there are no trees in Quixel Bridge, but don't worry, Quixel is not only serving here. Let's go to the Unreal Engine store, enter Megascan trees in the search bar and search. Alternatively, you can type trees and activate the free filter on the right. Quixel Megascans trees are the highest quality trees you can find for Unreal. In addition, they are available for free in the market. I am adding Common Hazard and Black Elder trees to our project. If you encounter any problems while adding, you can try closing the project and add later. You can add the trees we added to our content browser by adding and dropping them from the Geometry Pivot Painter folder or using the Foliage tool. It is that simple. If you would like to understand more about Megascan trees, you may check the Quixel video about Megascan trees on YouTube. Now, let's move on to the last part of this section. We will learn how to turn the textures we downloaded from Quixel Bridge into 3D shapes. For this, we need a plane model and our Quixel textures. Start by choosing and downloading the texture from Quixel Bridge. I downloaded Construction Gravel. Duplicate the plane model inside Shapes folder from the starter content. You can name the new model Rocky. We will work on it by dragging and dropping it onto our scene. First, transfer our material onto the plane, then switch to modeling mode. Go to the Mesh tab on the left, click on Remesh, and change the target triangle count to a higher value. I am setting it to 20,000, but this is up to you. Update our model by clicking Accept. Then, select Displace from the Deform tab. Choose Texture 2D Map as the method at the top and drag our ORD map to the Displacement Texture section. Change the channel to blue since the displacement data of our texture is in blue channel. The reason we can't observe any changes is that virtual texture support is enabled. We can disable this feature by opening the texture and searching for virtual texture. Untick it, then refresh the texture again by dragging it. Our object is starting to take shape. You can adjust the displacement values to capture a suitable elevation. Finally, choose Lattice from the Deform tab. When we will be using our object multiple times, we want them to blend better with each other. Holding the Shift key, select the outermost points, pull them down slightly and click Accept. Now we have a stone model that we can use on the edges of our structure. You can copy and paste it into our level as much as you like. But don't forget to activate the Nanite support for this mesh. That was our environment design section for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on the Discord server. I wish you all happy and healthy days.